NASCAR's Summer Classic, the Independence Weekend 400-miler at Daytona. Two drivers dominated, a third tried to grab the trophy and resulted in a frantic, frightening finish.
Green flag goes in the air. They'll settle it with 4 more laps to go.
Tony Stewart's had the best car all night long, but he doesn't have the numbers. 2 Joe Gibbs Racing teammates right on his back bumper.
Well, if Kyle Busch is going to get around Tony Stewart, Tony's going to make him go to the high side. Here comes Kyle Busch. Denny Hamlin goes along. Kyle Busch going for the lead here on the white flag.
They come down the line, white flag goes up, and Kyle Busch has grabbed the lead.
Kyle Busch has got the lead, but he hasn't got the win yet.
You got him here. You got him where you want him.
Tony looks to make the move. He swings to the high side. Kyle blocks. Tony gets it to Kyle. He hits the wall.
That's not the way I wanted to do it, but I went as far as I could go.
Tony Stewart is going to win the Coke Zero 400.
Well, Tony Stewart started on pole, led the most laps, and won the race Saturday night at Daytona. But as you just saw, it sure wasn't that simple. The finishing order behind Stewart scrambled by the huge last lap wreck that saw Kyle Busch wind up 14th. The big wreck also a factor during the night and really impacted the Chase Bubble boys, pardon the pun. We got plenty to talk about with our roundtable panel next on NASCAR Now.
NASCAR Now is presented by The Home Depot.
From the Home Depot Garage Studio, we welcome you to the fireworks on the 4th edition of the NASCAR Now Monday Roundtable. The showers of sparks and the big booms heard late Saturday night at Daytona had nothing to do with the post-race fireworks, and we've got plenty to talk about with our roundtable panel. We welcome to the program Ricky Craven, Randy LaJoie, and ESPN.com writer and NASCAR Now reporter David Newton. Welcome to the panel.
Good to be here.
Finish the sentence. Saturday night at Daytona, we saw
a sequel to the Talladega race.
Yeah, okay.
We've seen safety at the best. Nobody got hurt.
Yeah, that's good.
We saw Kyle Busch lose yet another race. How many times can he do this?
Yeah, that he was leading with the checkered flag in sight. That's an interesting point, too. Let's start our coverage of the race by looking at how it ended. The finish on Saturday night, what happened and why. Restart with 4 laps to go after a late caution set the whole thing in motion. The race's 2 dominant cars, Denny Hamlin and Tony Stewart, were side by side, not for long. Kyle Busch and Jimmy Johnson behind them. The outside lane didn't go, so that put Stewart into the lead, and here goes Kyle to try and get the lead.
The winning moves right here. When Tony Stewart went up and got Denny Hamlin off of Kyle's rear bumper and got back to the bottom, Denny Hamlin was a great pusher all night long.
So Stewart gets in line second, as Randy said, and goes about throwing all of his drafting tactics at Kyle as they come to the final lap.
And this is where the trouble begins. Tony Stewart's objective, get close enough to take him out of balance, and he does that right in the middle of turns 3 and 4. See the wiggle? See Kyle Busch working to the right to correct the car? Trust me, he hasn't lifted yet. But then he has enough of a run to get to his right side, and Kyle blocks, and you see the rest.
Vicious hit for Kyle with the driver's side door. Then he gets hit again by Casey Kane. Another look at it as they come down.
Yeah, when you look at that, they should have called the yellow by that point because Kyle got hit not once but twice the 3rd time. If they called the yellow there, that might have been avoided. But the major thing is, why didn't Kyle just hold his line there? He probably could have won the race if he just stayed where he was.
Now it's not done. They're still wrecking as the cars cross the finish line. Watch this. Oh, 3 nasty hits for Kyle Busch. Fortunately, everybody walked away okay, but for the winner and everyone else, the severity of the moment had its effects.
I don't feel as much gratification from winning this race as I probably should, I guess, just because I don't like the way the outcome happened. I don't like, you know, if we didn't win the race, you know, we didn't earn it. I mean, but I don't want any part of earning a race because I didn't, you know, because the guy that was leading the race got wrecked. I mean, and I don't know that we did anything wrong. I mean, I've seen replays of it, and you know, he's protecting his position, which he's got to do. I mean, that's what he has to do as a driver. He can't just sit there and let us make a move like that and not try to defend it. You know, I'm not shaken by it. It doesn't matter who it is. You know, you don't want a race to be decided like that.
That's part of this. This is a product of restrictor plate racing with these race cars. So what are you going to say? Everybody on this race team worked their tails off, and we had a good race car. I can't say anything. I'm not pointing fingers at Tony. He was trying to win the race. Kyle was trying to block him to come for the win, and we got turned around.
Man, it's a lot like Talladega. I mean, it's just the guy who's leading is at the mercy of the guy who's second, and you know, Kyle's trying to do everything he can to hold that lead right there, and you know, Tony's doing everything he can to try to win. You can't put blame on anybody. It's both of them. They see the checker flag. They're both going for a win.
I got to see the replay. It looked like just hard racing, and just, you know, you can touch with 20 pounds of force, but 25 pounds will wreck the guy in front of you. So, you know, wish they wouldn't have wrecked each other, but it's, you know, good race.
You know, it's plate racing. We're damned if we do, damned if we don't. These cars punch a big hole of air, and the second place guy can sometimes get a run, and over time we've all understood that you can be really aggressive blocking, and you know, that time it just didn't work for the 18, and the guys are racing. You know, Tony didn't mean to dump them. Same thing with Talladega. It's just the product of restrictor plate racing.
So Tony Stewart picks up his second win of the season, and traditionally he's just getting to the part of the year where he really gets hot. Since joining the Cup ranks in 1999, no driver has more wins after June 1st than Tony, who also ranks first in top 10s in points in that time. Lots to go through here. Let's start with the racing. Kyle Busch, Tony Stewart, Denny Hamlin, the tactics of each driver, what they were trying to do, and what the results of that were as they got started from 4 to go right through the end.
Yeah, you got to remember, first of all, you take the accelerator out of the equation. Everybody runs wide open. And from Kyle Busch's standpoint, having Tony Stewart behind you doesn't help because he's an expert at this. And if you do this long enough and you're the leader late in the race, you can feel the guy behind you, the driver behind you, you can feel when he makes that move to the right rear because it stalls your car. And I can assure you, Kyle felt that and reacted to it.
So you see how they restarted double wide with Denny Hamlin, about the only guy that had been able to pass Tony Stewart under green all night, by the way, to his outside, but it just didn't work.
Not at all. I mean, the outside on restarts, at first, by the first and second turn, it was good, but by the time they got to the backstretch, you needed to drop to the bottom because the outside just didn't run.
So they get through the first couple corners, and Hamlin has to jump in behind Kyle and Tony. Now, with a few laps to go, you see that they've pretty much distanced themselves from the rest of the pack. A couple guys trying to hang on, but the top four have gotten away. They're going to settle this among themselves. Now we come to the point where Kyle is able to get the win, or get the lead rather, and try and get the win.
Well, you know, they had a kind of an ideal situation because you had two Joe Gibbs racing cars back-to-back there. They probably could have gotten a line outside, but what happened was Tony said he let off a little bit to close the gap with him in the 18 so that he would not allow him to get that move. And when Kyle saw that opening, he just jumped out and went for it. Then he never really had a chance to react and go with him.
And it wasn't as obvious, but Tony went up to block to some degree as well, and it proved to be pivotal. Here,
speaking of pivotal,
yeah, he puts himself in position to win the race because, again, he's going to cause a stall to the 18 car. And these guys are doing exactly what they're taught to do. I mean, that's the problem with the finish. You can't break it down and criticize it because it is a product of the racing.
And this is twice now that Kyle has both times gone to block, and he got wrecked this time. A couple years ago when he was in the 5 car, he lost the race because he went to block. Like you said, David, if he would have just held his line, that man was in victory lane.
And this is not a product of the yellow line. Tony said, you know, at the Talladega where he won that race because Regan Smith went down below the yellow line, and then you had the bedlam you had at Talladega earlier this year because they were trying to stay above the yellow line. This was not a product of that. They had a chance to block and stay within the limits there, so you can't blame that.
But wasn't that also a reaction? In other words, they're not going near the line after what happened last year.
At Talladega, I've been on both ends of that. I've dumped Buckshot Jones, Todd Bodine, off the front bumper.
You can remember all the guys you've done?
Well, sometimes, just a couple of them. Because Todd reminds me all the time. And then when Buckshot got back to me, my head still hurts.
Did they stay around to talk to you afterwards?
Yes. Yeah, well, Todd's wife yelled at me and cussed at me, and luckily I had an excuse. I said, listen, I was out of it. I mean, I had carbon monoxide poison. You know, the chassis was burned. That was my excuse. I'm sticking to it. But you, like you said, you can feel the guy behind you. But when you're just riding along there at 190 miles an hour, it doesn't take much of a bump to send that guy.
And for some reason, these races, restrictor plate races, stick with you. You replay these, the mistakes you made, because there are options afterward.
We all like to assign blame. It's what the fans like to do too. Tony's fault, Kyle's fault, just racing. I heard you kind of start to answer that a minute ago, Ricky.
Yeah, and I just don't believe that you can be critical of either driver because In this type racing, you have to be defensive and offensive, and you have to decide when.
This is something that, like you said, who's at fault? Everybody was. You know, when you're on the interstate, you got cruise control on, and some cat cuts you off, you know, you just can't run in the back of them. You got to hit your brakes and take your cruise control off.
Yeah, but you got to blame the car too a little bit, because the car was not able to pass on the outside. Kyle was going to block the inside. There was no way that Tony was going to go below him. So Tony was going to probably have to go high, and that's where he was going, but I don't think he could have gotten around him at that point. So you got to blame the car because it's so hard to pass up there.
I was interested, and will be interested, to see fans' reactions to the finish. Both at Talladega and at Daytona, we had these frightening wrecks coming to the checkered flag. And I want to know if it took some of the excitement off it from you, watching these hard crashes where people can get hurt. So our ESPN Sports Nation poll, what was your reaction to Saturday night's finish at Daytona? Did you love it? You hate it? Were you frightened by it? All the above? Log on to ESPN.com and vote. We'll have your results a little bit later on in the program. So what's next in the Jeremy Mayfield saga? More news today. David's been covering the story. We'll talk through it in just a bit and get the latest update. Daytona was a rough night on some of the Bubble Boys in the race to the chase. The latest standings shortly, and some of what happened to some of these guys Saturday night. Those standings were also shuffled in part by the big one, which damaged the cars of several drivers. We'll look at that when NASCAR Now continues.
NASCAR Now, presented by The Home Depot. Visit HomeDepot.com. More saving, more doing. That's the power of The Home Depot.
Single file up front. First double wide battle and trouble breaks out. Here's Damon Strevey, Casey Kane, David Rudeman, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Clint Bowyer. We're going to wad up a dozen of them. They're still spinning, they're still crashing, and they're still sliding as we've got a good dozen cars involved over here on the back straightaway.
The big wreck. It happened Saturday night on lap 77, claiming all or in part 13 cars, some of whom were having pretty solid nights at the time. You look at the numbers before and after. Clint Bowyer, Casey Kane managed to get through it until he found Kyle Busch sitting in front of him at the checkered flag. Junior, Rudeman, Harvick, and somehow Brian Vickers involved in the big wreck but came through for a top 10 finish. How about the thoughts of those involved in the big wreck?
I was passing guys on the bottom, went up, cleared the 9 and all of them, and then I got hit, and he was getting hit, and it pushed me into 26, and it turned me into the fence. But just speedway race. I mean, nothing intentional, just it's what it is here.
There was smoke, and you can't see anything. I was on the bottom, and I saw smoke for maybe a second or two, and then the car in front of me stopped, and never did really hear anything out of the spotter as to what was going on.
We were just cutting up through there, and guys got together in front of us, and we just didn't have anywhere to go. So that's just tough luck, you know, ain't much we can do about it.
All right, but turn to my drivers here just for a second. How do drivers feel about one of these things when they're involved in them? You get resigned to it. You know, I'm thinking back to we were talking about drivers doing what they have to do because of the rules and all that. You're mad, you're frustrated, you resign. What's the emotion?
You're more mad if it's your fault, because then it's preventable. But the one point I need to make, and that I was watching there, I was like, most fans don't realize how narrow Daytona is, right?
Correct.
And when you have an incident like that, there's very little escape route. So you see these guys, they say, you're not going to go in the grass, I can guarantee you that. And you're not nearly as mad as you are frustrated.
Yeah. So who gets through and who ends up in it? Is that skill or just pure luck?
Probably a little bit of both. When you open your eyes, if the smoke is clear and you didn't hit anybody, you're like, oh, cool, I missed it, guys. That was some great driving I just did.
If you make it through, it's skill. If you didn't, bad luck.
That's right, yeah. But these guys are wrecking on the straightaway. I mean, that's one of the things, you know, as good as this COT car is, it's probably too good for bump drafting. We heard Carl Edwards say, you can hit him at 20 mile an hour, but you go 22 mile an hour, you're going to turn the guy sideways. So as good as these cars are for side impacts and front to rear bumpers, man, you know, these cars are probably too good. The guys are getting too easy to run into each other.
Speaking of bumping, Dale Jr. said that this was a result of the flood, that the track's a little rough now.
Hit a carp.
Yeah.
Carpy.
So he's blaming it on the flood. Nobody else did, but Dale Jr. did. But, you know, officially now I'd say Dale Jr.'s out of the chase, so we can at least get that from this wreck.
Yeah. I'm curious what it's like being inside one of those cars, sliding around, waiting.
Been there, done that. It's not a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You slide for a long time, and then when you're sliding, it feels like a week. Not 2 days. I mean, you're sitting here, it's like, oh, boom, got hit once, and you slide, and you say, okay, my belts are tight. Boom, you hit again. And then when it gets quiet, you're like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
And then there's usually one more.
You started to mention before about how they're wrecking on the straightaways. Seemed like turn 2 and the back straightaway were the trouble spots all weekend, both in the Nationwide race Friday night and in the Cup race on Saturday night. Why?
Because you're coming off Talladega where you can bump draft and get away with it. The track's smooth, it's wide, and you come to Daytona and it's bumpy. And I'll tell you something that gets drivers in trouble at Daytona is courage. And you have courage because you just got away with it at Talladega.
Well, you know, turn 2 at Daytona is so much different than turn 4. I don't know why he didn't hold the brakes down right there. You know, the 12 car was sideways and kind of straightened himself out. The 12 car was going to wreck right there, but he made the 00 wreck. He was, hey, thanks for saving me. You know, but turn 2 at Daytona, you come off of there, Mark Martin lost his nose. He's just, oh, I don't want to hit the wall, and too bad the guy got him in a quarter panel and turned him. And there's something different with that corner than turn 4.
It's going to sound strange, but I started restrictor plate races if I qualified poorly and I had a mentality, there's going to be a close one, and I need to miss it. And you really do kind of prepare for that.
Yeah.
And how many wrecks did the 12 cause of this one? 2, 3?
I thought you were going to ask how many I caused. Thank you.
Yeah, you're not going to answer that.
That number's too high for us.
A little bit of a tough night there. All right, coming up later, Clint Boyer able to keep all challengers behind him in Friday night's NASCAR Nationwide Series Daytona race. We will look at it in a bit. But next, the Bubble Boys. Some had tough luck, some had incredibly resilient nights at Daytona. That when the NASCAR Now Monday Roundtable continues.
Welcome back to NASCAR Now, presented by The Home Depot.
The race for the chase is very close. Look at the bubble standings, if you will, with drivers separated by just 17 points going into Saturday night's Daytona race, and some of these drivers really had interesting nights. Let's start with Matt Kenseth, the Daytona 500 winner. Early in the race, he had some contact with Mark Martin.
And he lifted, tried to get off of Mark, but just couldn't get off of it.
Then gives up third place for a green flag pit stop at lap 57, thinks he has a tire problem. The caution waves while he's in the pits, which not only helps him, it makes him the leader for the restart. That worked out well. He couldn't hold it for long as Denny Hamlin went by him. Matt's running 5th at the final restart. Looks like he's the only guy to lift for the wreck. He ends up 8th. Juan Pablo Montoya, involved in the Martin incident. He's the guy that ripped the splitter off the front of the 5 car. Then he pits at lap 44 with a tire problem, goes a lap down. Stay with me on this. Gets a free pass at lap 57 on a debris caution from Sam Hornish's car. Has to pit as the field is coming to the green for the restart from that yellow. Loses the lap again. Then gets another free pass in the big wreck. He's back on the lead lap, then loses spots on the final pit stop when he slides through his pits and get blocked in by Gordon. And through all that, races back to finish 9th at the finish. I'm out of breath. How about Jeff Burton? He was one of the few to actually pass Tony Stewart for the lead on the night.
About time an RCR car showed up.
It was a power move.
That happened at lap 127. He led 1 lap, then 2 laps later, he's headed to pit road after contact with Montoya. He loses a lap, gets the free pass at the lap 145 caution for debris, then gets caught in the huge final stretch shuffle. Jeff Burton winds up finishing 16th.
We were in control of our own destiny, and you know, I believe if we do our job, then we'll have good luck. And you know, we did our good job tonight, and we had something not go our way, but you know, we're a good race team, and we're going to keep fighting. I feel good about what we can do. I feel really strong that we can get ourselves in the chase, but you know, it's time to get going.
How about some other bubble boys who had tough nights? Mark Martin, 11th in points beginning the night. We saw this a minute ago. A tangle off turn 2, front splitter missing now, and that's just the beginning of his troubles. Mark winds up finishing in 38th spot at Daytona. David Ruderman was 14th in points starting the night. The big one was the beginning of his troubles. Ouch. Then at lap 102, it gets worse. Trouble in turn 2.
And that may have been the product of the first impact.
Yeah. So Ruderman winds up finishing in 36th position with his heavily damaged car. Clint Boyer, 15th in points starting tonight. Also, the problem for him was the big one.
There's a lot of these guys that are just hanging on by their fingernails. Don't cut them, guys. You know, these guys are just sliding over. We just want to make this thing so we can get to racing, get in this chase, and let's get on with it.
I had trouble calling Mark Martin a boy. The guy's 50 years old. He can't be a boy. Well, what does bother me about, you look at this thing, and he's got 2 guys there, Mark Martin with 3 wins, David Rubin with 1. I think it's time for NASCAR to implement a wild card. The NFL have the wild card thing. A guy that's got to win deserves a chance to make a race for the chase.
See, they're very close, the standings. Matt Kenseth with 100 points to the good, David Rudiman 74 to the bad. When you look at these bubble standings and think that there are 8 races to go, what strikes you?
I'll tell you what strikes me is the resilience of Juan Pablo Montoya. Since we all started talking about it, he just continues to up his game. I believe he has to have a top 5 or some top 5s to qualify for the chase. He hasn't yet. But with this momentum and the direction they're headed, he could.
You got to look at the wins. Like he says, Mark Martin with 3, David Rudiman with 1. You know, these guys are winning races, and they're not getting the points. They're bad races. They have to make their bad races better.
Right. And there's not a name you saw in there but Kyle Busch. I mean, the guy's won 3 races. He had another finish that cost him a chance to win this past week. He could easily, if he keeps doing that, doesn't get consistent, he could easily fall out of this thing.
And I don't like the effect that has on drivers, okay? When I was a driver, I understood points racing, I understood the reward, but I don't like the psychology it creates for drivers because you got to appreciate Kyle Busch going for it, and you don't want to lose that.
Yeah, head games wins championships, though. I mean, that's one thing that there are guys chasing points, but there's a lot of head games in this stuff.
It's interesting, Ricky, when you were mentioning Montoya before, I thought to myself, you know, maybe he'll get him a win at Watkins Glen. But the way the road course races have been, the strategy that's involved, you can't just count on the good road racing drivers getting up there either. So we'll see, looking for some top 5s on some of these guys with 8 races to go. Up next, one of the 2 drivers who dominated Saturday night's Daytona race joins us, Denny Hamlin, on the NASCAR Now Monday Roundtable in a minute.
Kyle blocks. Tony gets into Kyle. He hits the wall. Tony Stewart is going to win the Coke Zero 400.
We'll see a lot of friendships established this evening as drivers find drafting partners to work with, but as we get down to the late laps, friendship can be very, very fickle here at Daytona.
You can plan all you want to. Doesn't mean one cotton-picking thing when it comes down to that checkered flag.
All right, bud. Welcome to a nice, hot, sticky night in Daytona. You just let us know how that car is reacting all night. Try to stay on top of it. You'll be able to have it your way at the end of the night.
Green flag goes in the air, and we are underway.
Jeff Gordon's in that outside lane. Gordon down in front all by himself.
I'm not sure what to do here. I should just ride or what? Whatever you want to do, bud. Whatever you want to do. We got a long, long night. A lot of patience here.
Bye-bye, Jeff Gordon with no drafting help.
And bottom line, it looks like the way to go right now.
Here comes Kyle Busch diving wildly to the inside.
I mean, if you want to throw something at us and do something, you want to?
At the front of the pack, it's on for the lead. Tony Stewart to the outside.
Keep doing what you're doing there, bud. Got a little bit of blaze on the right rear. All I heard really was keep doing what I'm doing. That's good enough for me right now.
It's all going to be decided by drafting help, and right now, everybody's going with Tony Stewart.
You had your whopper out there yet? We saw the King riding with you a little while ago. I dropped it in the floor.
All of a sudden now, Kyle Busch has got his hands full.
Reagan gets it to the back of him.
What a ton of ass. All you had to do is just stay in line. Just help a brother out and be cool. No, that's all right.
Trouble breaks out. David Rudiman, Dale Earnhardt Jr. We're going to wad up a dozen of them.
Thanks, boys. 4 tires, about 6 or so gallons of fuel. We're going to beat them off pit road here, aren't we, guys?
Everybody up front is coming to pit road.
Be ready. All the way, beat them. All the way out. Good job, boys, good job.
Tony Stewart gets off pit road first.
Great job, guys.
Here they come back to the triangle. The green flag goes up in the air.
Tony Stewart looks back, sees Kyle Busch poised in position and ready to pounce. Here comes Kyle Busch going for the lead here on the white flag.
I am the leader. Woo, woo.
Kyle Busch has got the lead, but he hasn't got the win yet. Tony Stewart is there.
Tony looks to make the move. He swings to the high side. Kyle blocks. Tony Stewart is going to win the Coke Zero 400. A spectacular move, but you knew it was going to be something like that.
Did an awesome job there, Tony. Pit crew, everybody. Awesome job. Well, that's not the way I wanted to do it. Kyle bailed the car and walked.
We talked about fireworks and a spectacular finish to the Coke Zero 400, and you just had one.
Well, two drivers led most of Saturday night's race at Daytona, Tony Stewart and Denny Hamlin. Denny leading 63 of the 160 laps before finishing third. Denny joins us now to talk about his race from his home outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. Denny, thanks for the time. I'm sure you've replayed the final several laps, about 1,000 times in your mind. Anything that you'd like to rethink?
I don't know. I was sitting there listening to the highlights. I didn't hear my name one time, and I think I was in the top 2 or 3 all day. But no, it's just one of those things. There's not much I could have done other than probably be selfish at the end and try to go for the win. But I was definitely going to mess my teammate up and hang him out. He probably would have got a better finish as it turns out. But I mean, when he made the move on Tony, I had to go up high with him, but by doing that I knew I was going to open up the door for the 48 to go low on me and help Tony, and that's what kind of happened. It just worked out to where their lane worked better.
It seemed like in watching the race, to me, you had to start outside of Tony on a number of those restarts, and for whatever reason the outside lane just didn't seem to go as well as the inside. Thoughts on that looking back on it in hindsight?
Yeah, I'm pretty amazed why the outside line didn't work this past weekend. Usually, I mean, it kind of felt like a nationwide race, to tell you the truth, how everyone just kind of ran on the bottom, especially on the restarts. It seemed to be pretty good. It never seemed like we could get 2 to 3 really good guys up on that high line to help push each other and make a move on the guy, whoever was restarting. Usually it was Tony, because he beat us out on pit road each time. But yeah, never really could get that strong run on the high side that we've seen in the past.
Denny, the finish of the Daytona race Saturday night and the Talladega race, the last restrictor plate race, both ended with big crashes. I heard a lot of resignation in drivers' voices after the race was over, kind of a lot of the it is what it is syndrome. Your thoughts on what happened at the end of the race, the finish?
Echo that same thing pretty much. There's not much we can do about it. If you slow the cars down, we're going to be even more aggressive. There's really that's just a product of what we've got to work with right now. With the speeds we're running, the cars that we're given to drive, that's the best we can do. I mean, it's a great show for the fans. They can't really complain too much about that. But yeah, I mean, as a driver, you kind of hate to see that, because man, it's a chance that a driver really could get hurt. But I just don't know, if you slow them down, how much better your show is going to be.
8 races to go until the chase. You're 6th in points. You're 201 to the good. What are your thoughts on your season so far?
It's been all right. The last month has definitely been better than the month before that, where we've had so many mechanical issues and whatnot. But we're back on the top 5 track, to where we're running top 5 more consistently. We've got some new cars that are coming out that are a little bit better than what we've had in our stable in the past. So I'm pretty confident in what we've got and what we've got coming for the most part. So, I'm not completely happy with 200 points. It's better than being 200 out, that's for sure. But right now I'm just trying to build over 13th place. That's all we're trying to do. We want to not have to race our way into Richmond. That's our only goal. Is as long as we go to Richmond and can race for a win and not race for points, that'll be a lot more comfortable.
In Formula One racing, where 2 teammates drive cars that basically look identical, there's a lot of rivalry between teams. Just, I want to be the best car for my team. As you look around and you're racing with Kyle every week in the season that he's having, how does that affect you?
He's not really having that much better of a season than I am. He's a little bit further down the points list than what we are, but he's had a lot of late race troubles. We've had mechanical troubles, and there's always a battle between teammates. You always want to beat your teammate. However, we're going to do whatever we can to help Kyle get a win late in the race. In that situation that came up at Daytona, if I was the one making the move, I'd expect him to be right there in my bumper pushing me. He did it for me in a nationwide win last year. And I mean, regardless of what, the competitive
that you have between teammates, you're always going to want to be you're always going to want your team, regardless of whether it's the 18, 11, or 20. You want one of them to get in victory lane. You're going to do everything possible to do that. So that was our goal. It was to push him to a victory because that's the best chance we had this weekend. And, it just didn't work out for him.
Yeah, I wouldn't even think it specifically about Saturday night, just in general, but it is interesting how it does apply to that race. Looking ahead this Saturday night, Chicagoland Speedway, mile-and-a-half track. Thoughts on that race?
Looking forward to it. Hopefully we got a car as good as what we did in Michigan. We had a new car there that seemed to perform a lot better on the mile-and-a-half, 2-mile racetracks than what we've raced in the past. And through meeting with a lot of guys at Gibbs and everything, I think we've got a pretty good game plan going into Chicago, and we didn't typically run really well there in the past. I think last year we had a gauge malfunction about 6 or 7 laps in, and that took us out of the race. But hopefully no mechanical issues this weekend. We can just go out there and race, and if that's the case, then we should be pretty good. I'm pretty confident.
And by the way, if it makes you feel any better, I was thinking the same thing as you were watching the highlight, too. You were one of the stars of the show Saturday night, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Denny Hamlin, driver of the FedEx Toyota, who, again, he and Tony Stewart combined led 151 of the 160 laps on Saturday night, with Denny winding up finishing in third. Reaction to what you just heard?
Well, nothing really surprising. Denny had a chance to win this race. He was probably the one guy that could have been in position there to make a move at the end, but he just never was in the right spot at the right time.
A couple comments he made that hit home with me is that among friends or teammates, the common theme, you got to have some association, some allegiance to one another, work together, but in the end, the driver who's the most selfish, as bad as it sounds, usually prevails, and you have to be selfish in these restrictor plate races to win.
Anytime race car drivers are selfish. I mean, to win a championship, you have to be selfish. You got to be selfish to your family, because you got to give up your life to maintain 24/7 your race car.
I'm not so sure Kyle would have tried to help him as much as he was going to try to help Kyle.
We'll never know, that's for sure. Still to come on the NASCAR Now Monday Roundtable, David's been covering the whole Jeremy Mayfield thing for us, and there are some new developments today. We'll sort through it in a few minutes. But next, Friday's Nationwide Series race at Daytona also had a wild finish. Clint Boyer took the win. Highlights when we come back.
You're watching NASCAR Now, presented by the Home Depot.
Friday night, it was the NASCAR Nationwide Series Subway Jalapeno 250 at Daytona. Defending champ Clint Boyer on the pole, while current championship leader Kyle Busch started back in 19. David Reagan started outside of Boyer. Remember, Reagan won the last plate race for the Nationwide Series at Talladega. Would the big one happen? Well, it almost did at lap 17 when Michael Annett had his troubles.
Had a flat left front tire. And boy, they avoided a big one there.
Yeah, first of 2 cut tires for him. Just like the Cup race, most of the troubles happened off turn 2. That one took out Dale Jr. From the race at lap 57. Clint Boyer made what was the winning pass on Matt Kenseth when the 17 team tried a little strategy that didn't work out. Fuel only on a pit stop. Those tires did help at Daytona. Green-white checker finish set up by this wreck with 6 laps to go.
Looks like a cut tire. They just exploded a tire, and it doesn't get any prettier, I can tell you that.
It doesn't get any prettier.
Never like to see this.
The jalapeno.
This is when the instinct takes over again. You say reverse whatever it took to get in this car, but keep your composure.
Curtis Davis okay after that scary moment as he bails out of the race car. So Clint Boyer led the field to the restart with Carl Edwards alongside, but just like Saturday night, Friday night, the outside line wasn't the place to be.
And you had Kyle Busch pushing you. Come on, Kyle, he's saying. Don't jump to my outside.
They didn't make it all the way through the green-white checker. A crash behind the leaders brought out the caution and ended the race, with Clint Boyer getting a Daytona trophy after leading 48 of 102 laps.
All right. Finally won at Daytona. Woo!
Slept in the Holiday Inn Express the night before.
He was awfully smart, wasn't he? So Clint Boyer with the Daytona victory. Kyle Busch finished second. Carl Edwards finished third. The gap 172 points between them as they go to the Chicagoland this Friday night at 7:30 Eastern on ESPN, by the way. They are pulling away from the rest of the pack in the championship standings. Reaction now from Mr. Boyer.
Can't begin to tell you what this place means to me, my family, everything you ever worked for is to come to Daytona, let alone win a race here. Nationwide race, Holiday Inn, just want to thank everybody. want to thank Chevrolet. You know, what an incredible race car. The fans for coming out. This is one of the best places to watch a race, and people got their money's worth tonight. It's just a great race. I told Richard before, you know, it's been tough this year. Been tough on him, been tough on everybody. Just real proud of everybody. Everybody at RCR, ECR, the engine program, this is pretty special.
Heard Clint talking about the meaning of winning at Daytona to him. Randy, you've won there before. I'm sure you can relate to that.
Well, you know what? Not only have I won there, I've been knocked out. I've been hauled out of there in an ambulance. But then 10 years later to come back and win one, and then I won 2 other ones. So I won 3 races there. That tunnel, you come through there, you get goosebumps. I get them right now. Just that's Daytona, man. That's like Indy for an open wheel guy. Daytona Beach, Victory Lane there. I went to the old one, and I went to the new one. It doesn't get any better.
What's interesting, this is the first win by an RCR car this year, but last year they would have 2, maybe 3 cars in this race. This year they had only 1 car. I think that's just a sign of the economy and the impact it's having on this series.
I think that is interesting that he sort of went it alone, right? I mean, winning it without a drafting teammate. But again, what Randy said, you know, there are special places, and the emotion in Clint Boyer's voice speaks volumes.
So congratulations to Clint and the Childress team on getting the Daytona victory on Friday night. Still to come, what you thought of the Daytona finish Saturday and our reactions to same. Poll results in a few minutes. But up next, more Mayfield. What's the latest on what's going on with NASCAR's most popular non-racing driver?
72 hours from him being on the racetrack, if that's how long it takes to get a result, he should be tested. 24 hours after that, he should be tested again.
Manny's back. Wednesday Night Baseball presented by Smirnoff Ice. Dodgers and Mets, 7 Eastern on ESPN. And then a classic matchup on Sunday Night Baseball presented by Taco Bell. The Cardinals and the Cubs. That's ESPN, 8 Eastern time on Sunday.
One thing that I disagree with the judge on is that, you know, my safety is important to me. He potentially puts my safety in jeopardy by that decision. The fact of the matter is he failed a drug test, and that opens the door to question. And so I deserve to 100% know that he is 100% clean.
It's been hard for us all to really follow, and the rumors have been running wild. At the end of the day, we just want 43 sober guys on that racetrack.
I feel 100% confident being on the racetrack side by side with Jeremy. That doesn't mean that he didn't fail. I don't know what happened, okay? I'm just saying that if he races, I have no problem.
Well, ultimately, it was the judge's decision to turn it out how he turned it out. So, you know, he's free to race, which is fine. And, you know, if he's out there on the racetrack with me, then doesn't bother me. Normally, we're ahead of him anyway.
You know, when somebody tests positive is something to be seriously considered. And, you know, there's a lot of responsibility that goes along with that. And then when you release somebody as a federal judge, you release somebody to go back and do that without necessarily, in my eyes, clarifying everything. That's not cool. And, you know, people make mistakes. I just hope the judge didn't make one.
And our Hot Laps topic tonight concerns the ongoing Jeremy Mayfield case. Basically, what I meant before was never has a guy who's not racing been talked about so much by so many as Jeremy Mayfield is now. David Newton has been covering the story for ESPN.com and for NASCAR Now. More developments today. What's the latest?
Well, NASCAR filed an appeal today with the judge that passed the original or lifted the suspension originally. They had to do that. That judge likely will not overturn his own suspension. I mean, it's an own injunction, so they'll then go to the Court of Appeals and go from there. Next step for Jeremy is to try to get back on the track. His crew chief says there's a good chance he could be on the track this weekend at Chicagoland. Jeremy said there's a good chance he could be on the track then. At that point, NASCAR is going to step in and start drug testing, that procedure there, to at least give the drivers a little confidence that he's not on anything right now. The problem with that, it takes 4 days, and they feel like that's one thing that the judge misinterpreted in the first place, because you can't go to the track and take a test on Thursday or Friday and have the results back the next morning. You know, and even if they did take the test on Thursday and they could get it back Friday morning, he could take something on Friday night and still be, you know, have something in the system on Saturday. So this is a real complicated case. It's going to take a year or more for this thing to play out.
As you follow this thing at the racetrack, in the courtrooms, and through all the different filings, what's your general impression of the whole proceeding?
In fact, I think I spent more time in the courtroom the last time than the racetrack. Basically, this is kind of a situation that's been created by NASCAR because there were a lot of questions about not having a list and several other items going into the process. Now that they are in a court, they're finding out that these things are being questioned. So what I think is going to happen long term, they've revealed some holes with this. The attorneys have shown that this needed to be done, this needed to be done. And I think eventually, when this is all settled, NASCAR will go back and close some of those holes so this sort of type situation doesn't happen again.
It was interesting to me. I had somebody ask me over the past weekend at Daytona, well, why is Jeremy Mayfield such a big topic of discussion? Well, first of all, he's the first Cup driver to really run afoul of the substance abuse policy. And second, how many people have ever taken on NASCAR in an administrative proceeding and won something? I don't mean won the big thing because it's a long way from finish, but won anything, and it's got a lot of people's intrigue. My drivers, on your side, you heard the various drivers' reactions to these latest developments and so on, and the questions they were being asked. What are your reactions to the whole thing?
Well, the one driver's comment that stuck with me was Mark Martin. He said he's 100% comfortable sharing the track with Mark Martin, which is critical, folks. You need to be 100% sure, not 95, not 80, not even 50. I mean, the fact is, I'm hearing from other drivers, they're not 100%. And I think that's the key component to all this, that it's not unanimous across the board, like Mark Martin, that they're comfortable. Therefore, it's a distraction. And if it's a distraction, I think that's unfair because, you know, these guys only want to race, you know, and they're having to deal with this. And I don't think that's appropriate.
Yeah, you listen to what Jeff Burton says. Jeremy, get ready to put a catheter in, pal. They're going to be checking you from the time you check in at a racetrack, Monday next week, every day. You're getting checked 72 hours, 24 hours. And if you're clean, do it, man. Get back into that seat.
Ricky, not to be critical, but you drove with some head injuries. Did drivers feel uncomfortable with you on the track? And that's the thing. You had several drivers that went out there and signed affidavits saying, I don't want to be on the track with somebody that's known to use drugs. Well, nothing's been disproven there as far as that goes. Right. And Jeff Gordon, I was kind of standing up to him the other day and asking him about that. And the bottom line is none of these guys are not going to drive because there's a guy on there that may have done drugs, just like there's not a guy out there that's not going to drive because they may have felt like your head injury or somebody else's head injury might cause them.
Randy's got a smart comment here, so go ahead, Randy.
All drivers have head injuries. It doesn't matter where, all drivers got head injuries.
To your point, David, I think that there is some self-governing here that's necessary. And I stepped out of the car because of those injuries. And you take that time to put yourself back where you're 100%, and then everybody you're racing against is 100%.
But no drivers questioned you. They never said you should get out, did they?
Well, not, you know, I didn't hear it. That doesn't mean it didn't exist. And you know what? To the other drivers, to be fair, they should have been concerned. And, you know, it was a tough situation that, you know, it may be a little easier after because you say, all right, this is how you do it or how I did it, and maybe that would work for somebody else. The problem with this is that it's unprecedented, and that's the point you made, Alan, that this hadn't ever happened, and I think that's why everybody's so uncomfortable with it because they want to see how it turns out.
And we will continue to see how it turns out in the days, weeks, months, and maybe years to come. Time for break on the Monday Roundtable edition of NASCAR Now. Up next, news and notes, poll results, and final thoughts. How did you feel? How do we feel about the finish at Daytona? People sure are talking about the finish to that race Saturday night at Daytona. When we're done here on ESPN2, if you want to flip over to ESPN News, our Monday Roundtable panel is going to continue talking about the outcome of Saturday night's wild 400-miler down at the beach.
NASCAR Now, presented by the Home Depot. Visit HomeDepot.com. More saving, more doing. That's the power of the Home Depot.
The big Michael Waltrip Racing announcement is tomorrow. Marty Smith will be there and will report live on Tuesday's NASCAR Now, 5 Eastern Time, ESPN2. Atlanta Motor Speedway settled its $1.6 million lawsuit with Pep Boys. The auto parts chain didn't pay the track for naming rights of this year's Sprint Cup Fall race because of the date change, but Pep Boys will remain the race's title sponsor. Johnny Benson going to undergo some shoulder surgery this month. Don't try this at home. I'm a trained professional. He was injured in a super modified race last month. And NASCAR announced that the Toyota All-Star Showdown will take place at the Toyota Speedway in Urbandale, California, January 29th and 30th of next year. So what did you think of the finish Saturday night at Daytona? Our Sports Nation poll says you loved it. Basically, you loved it. All of the above got a little bit of ground. Nobody hated it, and very few, and actually nobody, was frightened by it. Okay. I want to get our panel's thoughts. When I saw the finish, I wasn't excited. I was scared because I wanted to see that everybody was okay. Maybe I'm closer to it than most fans are because I'm around the sport and I know some of these people. And I wanted to see how the people felt with that poll to see if fans felt differently than people that worked inside the sport. How did you feel about it?
I felt exactly like you felt. I felt exactly the way Tony Stewart sounded. I was worried about Kyle Busch, and I want to say this, that I'm very thankful for NASCAR, the improvements of the car. People like Randy LaJoie, who's dedicated himself to making a safer seat, and Kyle Busch benefited from that.
You know what, this sport, 10 years ago would have had 3 ambulances full of guys taking them to the infield care center. They hurt guys. Daytona testing. Darrell Waltrip got hurt real bad. These wrecks are kudos to NASCAR and their safety R&D shop.
You only got about 15 seconds.
I agree with all of that, but the one thing I thought is, how am I going to catch Kyle Busch, and what's he going to say? And here's what he said.
The reporter's perspective. All right. Well, it's off to Chicagoland for the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series and the NASCAR Nationwide Series. Obviously, full coverage from there this weekend. And tomorrow night, NASCAR Now 5 Eastern Time, the Tuesday edition with the big Michael Waltrip Racing announcement. We hope that you will join us then. Thanks for watching. See ya.